All right, everybody. Welcome to the B2B Growth Lab. As usual, I'm here with Zach and Rob, and we are digging into, basically a resource here. We've got a little bit of a think tank, a bunch of different ideas, and various levels of expertise on how to help you grow your business. And I think my favorite thing about these conversations so far, and the stuff that I get to talk to these guys about in the background, is how broad the level of expertise is. It goes all the way from the outside to the customer facing, straight through the operational stuff into the internal work, which is, how do you actually take a business forward with the heart, with the mind, with the leadership that makes it something that sticks around, I guess, is made to stick, to borrow the cliche or the title. And today we're talking about retention, because you can acquire customers. That gets you in the game. But just to start what I'm sure is going to be a cascade of statistics and facts and ideas today, I did some broad research, and there's a 30% attrition rate through a clunky onboarding experience. So you can be losing customers within the first 24 to 48 hours after that transaction and not even know it. And I'm sure there's going to be more than that. So, that being the case, let's start digging into this.
So that you were right. It's going to start a cascade, because that statistic, think about that. Think about how many millions of dollars you lose over the course of a year because your onboarding system sucks. And because you don't know why your customers actually want to work with you, right? Like, customer churn happens when what a customer is sold does not align with what they experience. And they say, well, screw it, I'll just go look somewhere else. And so it's like that lack of understanding really impacts things.
We talked about on the last call too, it's worth bringing up here with retention. That first visit, you got to set a hook. You got to keep them coming the second time, especially in a restaurant. Set that hook again, get them coming a third time. Then your odds of a fourth visit go up to 72%. Until then, you're just hovering around 40%. So you got to be thoughtful when you get that initial experience. Treat them like they're valuable.
Yeah. Well, and I would ask, Rob, what's the difference between the first experience and the seventh experience?
Interesting. I think after you get to 4 or 5, as long as there's a regular cadence, you have some element of loyalty. So you almost have an opportunity to fall down and show them what you're worth by how you handle when you fall down. You have a bit of forgiveness that's available at 7, right? Later on, some more patience. They'll stick with you because you have that loyalty. I think if you fall down at 1, 2, or 3, your odds of being able to recover that are much lower.
That's really well said.
I completely agree. And I would say that experientially, there should be no difference, right? Here's the thing that's interesting. If you look at how Ray Kroc built McDonald's and what they are doing with Chick-fil-A today, they are nearly the same strategy. It's like they're using the same playbooks, right? The menu doesn't change very much, but the experience, my pleasure, always a clean restaurant, right? They're always happy to serve you. Like, that was McDonald's in the 70s and 80s when Ray Kroc was growing that thing, right? And that's Chick-fil-A today. And you go to Chick-fil-A and you consistently have the same experience. That's where you earn that trust. So there fundamentally, experientially, shouldn't be a difference, whether it's a software program, a restaurant, a doctor's office. Like, there should be no difference between the first experience and the 7th experience or the 70th experience in terms of the customer getting the job done that they need to get done. When there is a discrepancy there, that's when the customer starts to think, maybe I should look somewhere else.
I think I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. I hope I do, honestly. I'm just thinking about the programming side of things for a moment. I wasn't anticipating this tangent, but like, what about a nice uniform sameness so that when you acquire a new piece of software, you don't have to hunt for every single little button, bell, and feature? Because I've seen people of varying degrees, right, over the years, just serving clients and in other environments, just completely struggle to, like, thank God they don't design bicycles like software, because yeah, handlebar seat and pedals would be 50 feet away from each other.
Yeah.
When Microsoft went to the ribbon, do you remember that?
Yeah.
And the heartburn and indigestion that corporate America had, like, people were screaming about it, like, where did file go? How do I save? And like, just lean into a learning mindset a little bit, click around, right? Nothing's going to explode. Just,
Yeah.
yeah. But maybe there was opportunity there, but most people didn't have a choice but to climb the learning curve there, figure out what a ribbon was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the context of retention, like, obviously we touched on a huge pain point, which is the onboarding side of it. And, to just tag one little piece on before we move on, I met with a guy recently who's basically a headhunter, right? He brings in talent, acquires it, et cetera. And even he was complaining about onboarding. We spent most of our call talking about an optimized onboarding experience for an employee, for a team member, for somebody who joins an organization, so that they could figure out that they do belong. And we touched on this last session a little bit as well. But I guess that's the thing I'm trying to lean into is where by your definition and your definition does retention occur? Like, how does it occur? What are the experiences? What are the touch points? Like, if we had to make a drawing, what would it look like?
Rob, do you want to take this one first?
Trying to think, the drawing's what's throwing me off a little bit. Like, I don't think of a picture. I don't know if I can get that far in that analogy, but I'll go back to, like, when I've mentored and coached people in service industries to truly treat complaints like gold and problems like opportunities. Things go wrong all the time in business. So what does it look like? I think it's trying to do the right thing and provide a high quality standard level of service, whatever that means in your business, right? Like, try to do good for everybody. And when you fail, don't get combative, don't get confrontational, just own it on behalf of the company, practice good service, good EQ, right? Lean in, help me understand, right? How could we make this right? Know what your giveaways are, what you could sacrifice, where your margins lie, right? Sometimes the concession is just dessert, right? Sometimes the concession is 10% off your bill. Sometimes the concession is the free next thing, whatever that thing might be. Who knows? You got to know that. You got to be ready, so you can have that mindset of, oh, here's a chance to show them what we're really worth. Because everyone fails. What really separates people is what they do when they fail, how they make sure the customers are taken care of. And I think that's the opportunity to build loyalty and retain, right? It's how you behave in that moment.
I really like that. Because I think that is part of where the value shines, right? Like, I think I've said this before. I'll say it again. I have a mentor who told me that doing business is the privilege of helping your customers solve problems. And if you're not showing them, hey, your patroning me is a privilege that I appreciate, you'll lose your customers. So I really like that. Yeah. And Jacob, going back to the question, I think that part of it is we forget that we have to win the sale after we've won the sale. See, a lot of times what happens is these businesses, they go out, they work really hard, they hustle, they knuckle under and they close a deal. And then they pass it off to onboarding or to the customer support folks, and they say, "It's your problem now." And that doesn't help anyone, because if that customer churns within 48 hours, guess what? That money is in and out of your bank account. You didn't actually do anything. And so I think that the key things that businesses should be looking at is time to value, not necessarily, can they do all of the things? Do they know how to use all the features? But which features matter the most to them, and how quickly do they get value, measurable, demonstrable value that they care about, not what you think they care about, but what they tell you they care about. How quickly can they get that value out of your product or system? Because that's what's going to keep them around. A lot of times buyer's remorse, right? These in and out people, they happen because, again, they are sold something. They have this expectation. They come in, their experience doesn't match their expectation. And so they fire you and they move on to somebody else. Yeah. And so you have to be so clear on what that value is for that individual or for that company that you can help them find it very, very quickly in your system. That's what onboarding processes really should be focused on. It should just be another layer of discovery and building relationships, because that is what you're talking about, Rob. That's the kind of relationship where it's like, oh, geez, Jacob just told me that what really matters to him is making sure that he can go home at 5 o'clock and that the systems keep running. Okay, so let me show him how to do that so that he doesn't have to worry about anything that's going on in the system after 5 o'clock. That's where the onboarding really matters, because everything else, they can come back. They can ask questions. You have help systems in place, forums, whatever, that they can ask to get the answers to those questions. What they need is to get to that value as quickly as possible. And when they do, then you build sticky systems that keep them.
Yeah. And I think there's this thing that I learned called the shifting of context, right? Where it's like, oh, this is difficult over here, but then you go find somewhere where it's easy and come back and it's like, oh, this is applicable. And I believe there's kind of a disconnect between service and then the tech. Like SaaS says software as a service, and we know how we expect people in a restaurant to behave. There's all these expectations. That was good service, that was garbage service. And then when you get to these, I don't know how many degrees of separation removed you can get when you get into the tech stuff and the software, it starts to fall down, right? I was thinking through this myself the other day because I've really shifted my business model a lot in the last couple of years, and even again in the last few months, and how I speak about it. Our onboarding process is actually 6 months, because as a growth partner, our goal is to be with the customer for the next 3 to 5 years, right? And so how do you slow things down so you can have the touch points and the deliverables? And I mean, we're still looking for wins within the first 24 or 48 hours, 7 days, like things like that you want, but it doesn't just immediately transfer, right? Because it's a weird restaurant if you go in and it takes 6 hours to get served drinks, right? Like you can have a slow food experience of 6 hours of dining and multiple courses, but if the onboarding is that long and it's like 6 hours of waiting to get to the beverages, it's weird. And things are supposed to move really fast in tech as well. So, how does that stuff translate for retention of like getting in, onboarding into the platform, getting those wins, the stickiness that you're talking about, and how do you get people back using it?
I think it depends on context, right? Because what you just talked about was, if I go to a restaurant and I'm waiting 6 hours for a drink, that's kind of weird, right? Mm-hmm. But it might not be weird in a separate context. Mm-hmm. And so the context really matters. And I think that the only people who set the contextual frame are your customers. Again, We have the privilege of serving them. But oftentimes when a business grows successful enough or big enough, they think, oh, they get the privilege of using my stuff. The instant you think that, the instant that you lose all your revenue, right? Because you treat customers like commodities instead of like people you get to serve. And so the customer sets the context. When you understand that context, then everything else makes sense, right? So with what you're talking about, it takes 6 months to put in systems, because if it were me, I'd say, okay, we're getting quick wins along the way. And yeah, it takes time to test all of this stuff to make sure that it makes sense. So contextually, I'm saying, yes, absolutely, that makes sense. If you came in and said, I can do it all in 6 hours, I'd say, okay, what kind of BS is this?
Right. And it's like the driving thing, right? Like you get your learner's permit for a year.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain proof of concept and that kind of stuff. So I guess that brings like the other question, like how do you do that stuff with people as well? I don't just mean customers, but also team, right? To bring, Rob into the conversation. How do you see that stuff rolling out and playing out where there's a management expectation, there's a long enough timeline, but then you're still squeezing in enough of those touch points to have it all work?
There's a beautiful segue here from systems to people. For any of us who have implemented enterprise SaaS solutions, right? So for this example, let's talk learning management system or learning experience platform. So I've implemented multiple across multiple organizations. Those projects take a long time, and it's not that onboarding that I'm talking about, but the impact of the decisions you make when you go through an implementation and you configure the user experience, right? You're making those 1,000+ choices. Should the system behave this way? How many clicks? What does the user have to do the thing I need them to do? Right? The software is one thing, picking the right thing, okay. But then what you do as far as implementation and all those decisions you make then show up at the table in the restaurant or at the computer for that new employee internally. So when they get there on day one and they're a, savvy, not 70-year-old, right? And they're sitting down and they have to punch in a login and a password. If that's me, what runs through my head is, surely we're on an Azure server and this is an Office 365 environment, and there's at least 3 different protocols for single sign-on authority. I just learned that our IT department here is kind of archaic. I have separate passwords for everything rather than leveraging my Windows login to get me into all the systems I need to get in. So that's very solvable. And that's like strike one in my onboarding. Did I just join an archaic company? Right? Day one, that's what I experienced. So think about the user experience, everything from their systems all the way to their leader, their work group, right? How do you make them feel attached and at home, confident that they belong there? Yeah, it's both the systems and the people. We got to work in both those.
I like that.
I like that too. And I would say that systems should be in the service of people, right? And I think that, okay, I'm going to get on my soapbox here a minute. So just bear with me. Jacob's like, ooh, all right, here we go. Okay. So I don't know how it is in other countries, but in the United States, we suck at teaching people how to find a job. And here's what I mean. When you go through our education system, what you're told is you fill out a resume, you fill out an application, you submit a cover letter, you ask them for the privilege of working for them. And then we sit here in our history classes, we talk about unions and the power of collective bargaining and all of that stuff. And we completely remove the power of the individual to bargain for their own benefit in a negotiation, a job negotiation. It's completely backward, because here's the truth. That employer needs you as much as you need them. See,
Uh-huh.
here's how it works. The employer needs you. They are selling something. They're selling money. You are buying that money with your time, money, energy, not money, but your time, your energy, your attention, your skill set, all of that stuff. And you have something that you bring to the table. They have something that they bring to the table. And you have a right as an employee to come in with certain expectations and expect them to meet that. Part of that is like Rob talked about. I'm sorry, is this 1982? Like, why do you need all of this stuff? Like, I'm sorry, we're in 2025 now. We have generative AI. Like, there's a lot that we can do to solve these problems. And on the business side, they can expect you to be attentive, to be there on time, to give your best work, right? But if we believe in a system, or if we're trained to believe in a system where you clock in, you clock out, you have no control over that negotiation, you are begging them for money and time and work, then you really incentivize and disempower the individual. But when you recognize that this is fundamentally no different from a buyer, from a customer seller relationship, it's just an employee-employer relationship where I'm selling money, they're buying it with time, right? Then I look at my employees and how I treat them differently, because I get the privilege as a manager of helping my employees solve problems.
And it happens, like, it's almost diminishing to say it this way because I've heard stories of exactly the opposite case. But I think a lot of the thinking that you're talking about is still like, I'm not building a business, I'm manning a factory or an assembly line. And I've heard of, places where assembly lines and factory workers are treated amazingly well and kept for a really long time, by the way. But that mentality seems to be very much that transactional versus relational. And I think one of the things you're talking about that is completely missing is I find people don't think or speak enough about opportunity cost. Look at that. Because whether it's that customer or that employee, if they leave before a certain time, it's a net loss. It was just a cost, not a profit,
Right.
at all, right? And there's a huge expense in time that people don't talk about. They'll talk about money all day long, but they won't talk about how they wasted 10 hours searching for a bargain, right? That saved them $4.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and this is the thing that's interesting, because customer or employee turnover is one of the most expensive things for a business. Rob, you probably know the numbers by heart, but it's something like 3 or 4 times their annual salary, depending on how high up the chain of command you go. Like, it's pricey.
Yeah. And at the very top, it's priceless, right? Get the C-suite wrong, and the cascade below them, and there's where's Kmart, right? Where's Venture? Where's there? No one saw Walmart coming, right? No one saw Jeff Bezos and Amazon coming. Come on.
And
right?
something similar just happened to Starbucks too, right? Like, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, and you can even track it in SaaS. There is the first CRM was called Act, and they owned the market, and they've been destroyed by HubSpot and these other companies. And it's like, come on, you didn't see them coming?
Right.
You had no resources. So they went from $1 billion company, right? Like, I think they were valued at $1 billion in their heyday. They're now like $20 to $50 million revenue. Wow. That's it. They've been completely destroyed. It's like Netflix and Blockbuster, man. Sure. And that's another example. Like, you didn't see these people coming?
Like, more people need more CRMs. It's not like what was there shrunk and their portion got lost.
In fact, the market is becoming nearly perfectly competitive in terms of market saturation. Like, you can say, I'm a 1 to 3 person plumber operating in Dayton, Ohio, and I guarantee you'll find a CRM that's exclusive for you. Like,
right.
It's true.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, retaining your people though. Like let's get back on that rather than just
Here's some of the
bashing the defunct C-suite. So,
We all sell to the C-suite. I don't think we made any friends, just barely.
right. Maybe that's a call to urgency that, I live just north of Chicago, right? I sit in a place where there's a lot of those companies and I'm watching, Walgreens go private and they're going to close 30% of their stores, right? You see if maybe if they had been on point, right, they wouldn't be in the situation they're in, right? So let's get back to people. Put the right people on the bus. Screen for culture fit, role fit, and leader fit. And keep them at least 2 years. The higher you go, you got to keep them longer to get them to actually pay off. If you let somebody go in the first 90 days, something's really wrong in your TA process. You lied about something, right? Like didn't give an accurate description of the job or the benefits or something like that. Or you have a serious leadership problem, right? It's generally one of those two things. Now, if they quit elsewhere, we got to look deeper for root causes, but 2x their salary is not an unreasonable. Some would argue it's even conservative because the higher you go, it gets more expensive. So get the right people on the bus, be diligent about it. There is a 25x ROI to be had at the front with employment screening, right? That's real. Talk to me if you want to know how that happens, but get it right. And then put them in the right seat on the bus. If they're super creative, intuitive, and imaginative, try and get them up to R&D as quickly as possible. Pull them in on things that aren't in their lane, right? If they're super diligent and concrete, put them in accounting, right? Frontline engineering, operations, right? Like that's where those people shine. So put them in the right seat on the bus and then tell them when they do a good job, coach them when they need it, treat them fairly, pay them fair to market, and you'll get discretional effort, right? If we go all the way back to behaviorism, it's not dead. Human beings aren't different, right? People want to do a good job by and large. Hold them accountable when they don't. Coach them. Let them know what good looks like. Treat them like adults. You'll be surprised at how they behave. And then, oh, look at that. They're staying because they feel they're treated fairly and respected. Oh, look at that. What do you know? Our top line's better and our bottom line's better. Oh, it's magic.
Hey, Rob, can I ask you a question? Because you said hire for culture. And I think that that's something that a lot of people say it's thrown out just kind of as this buzzword thing that people do. Right. But what does that actually mean? Because I'll be honest, in my culture, I wouldn't leave my girlfriend alone with my wife. But in other cultures, that's totally acceptable, right? So I just want to know, like, how do you define the culture of a company and how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. We could do a whole nother call on the different methods of measuring corporate culture. Some would say it's by the most awful people that you don't deal with, who you let survive there, that they define that. We can talk culture across nations. There's degrees of that, power distance, masculinity, et cetera, et cetera. You could look up, that's Hofstede's intercultural dimensions. Those have something to do with how they influence corporate culture and subcultures within a company. And then the most concrete way to answer that from a US perspective is it would be alignment with values and preferences. And that's not necessarily corporate values, that's part of it. But let's go a level deeper and more into clinical psychology. If we use the Hogan motivational values and preferences inventory, right, that would say if my science is 99 out of 100, that's one of my values. What does that mean? Well, that means there's a lot of empirical and critical thought going on. There's going to be a right answer, and it's worth the work to find the empirical right answer, right? That's a 99 in science. If you're a 99 in commercial, well, you're really going to think through the economics, right? The financial part of what are we doing? Is this really a good deal? What is the total loaded cost? Really, really loaded cost, right? Overhead, everything, shipping, exchange rates, money, right? Like you're going to be super diligent. You probably want your salespeople to be high in commercial, right? But there's a swim lane through the results of that assessment for a company. Think one standard deviation either side of a norm. And we could say if people fit in this, they'll tend to feel like they belong, right?
Okay.
With the culture.
And does that scale, that works departmentally as well? Or do you want to kind of go broader and make those values more diverse inside of departments to give them width?
That probably depends on the company, right? So some companies, either by their size or by their nature, have a very unified culture to where one graph could contain the entirety of the culture, right? They have minimum subculture variation.
Okay.
And other companies I've seen they're really far apart, either by location or by department, right? You could say the office in Chicago is this way, but the office in Hong Kong is vastly different. Right? And that's a big geographic difference. That's a big cultural difference. That's also a big work culture difference.
Where I'm getting curious about that is how does that map externally too, right? So then our customers are like this here, our customers are like that there.
Yeah. Yeah.
This, Rob, if I may just interject really quick, this is interesting to me because I think that you actually do see what you're talking about, that internal cultures also speak to external culture, and that impacts customer retention. For example, they did some research a number of years ago, and I'd be fascinated to see if this continues. But what they found is that in the United States, people who tended to be more left-leaning on the political spectrum shopped at Target, and people who tended to be more right-leaning on the political spectrum shopped at Walmart. And you go into those companies and you talk to those employees and you find, wouldn't you know it, the people who work there tend to align with those values as well.
Really interesting.
That's fascinating. You just presented me with a tremendous conflict.
Yeah.
Right? I have cognitive dissonance now. I mean, I don't know what to do. Yeah. But yeah, you would the culture of the company should self-sort on both ends of that, right? If you're doing a good job looking at retention, both behind the register and in your shoppers, you'll tend to retain what's aligned, who feels like they belong.
I think that word is the key, right? Like whether you're a customer or an employee, whether you're a team member or a client, you feel like you belong there.
Yeah.
That's the thing that we're trying to arrive at. And it's maybe a difficult thing to define in terms of what does belonging mean. But if you nail it for your company, then the people who are there know it and they can feel it.
And I would say even in our current culture where we so rarely have holistic alignment in values, right? And there's many ways in which we are quite polarized right now. If people carry enough respect for each other as human beings and they value them at the highest level as human beings, right? There are some discussions we shouldn't have in the work context, but that doesn't mean I have any less respect for you, right? Like, right.
That's really well said.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that, again, Republicans buy Nikes too. right? Like people have jobs that they need to get done, and your culture should be, at least your outward facing culture should be exclusionary enough that people can see there are boundaries here because they want to self sort into a culture, but it's got to be open enough that it's not like making people think, oh, I like their default shouldn't be I can't belong or I don't belong there, right? Like it should be I could belong there. Let me investigate more.
Do I need to buy the t-shirt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. Is there any other like final thoughts or things that you want to add in?
Well, I wonder if we talked about the value of retaining employees. I'm wondering if either of you have any hard stats on the like cost of customer acquisition versus the
Yeah.
cost of customer retention, because like anyone who sells loyalty programs would tell you it's worth it. But if we could just unpack some of those stats as a final crescendo to this talk, I think that would land that point brilliantly.
So I will dive in here real quick, Jacob, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It is 7+ times more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to keep an existing customer. 700 times, 7+ times, right? 700%.
Yeah.
That's a lot of dough. And I think that as a business, if you don't recognize that, then you have bigger problems. Like that's where a lot of your money is going. If you don't recognize that, you're wasting all of your money trying to acquire new customers, and they're just falling through the cracks, and you don't know that. And that's a big problem. And you need to work with our companies to figure that out and solve those problems. But the other thing that I would say is that customer loyalty programs, just since you brought it up, customer loyalty programs have to be aligned with what the customers value. And a lot of times they're selling these one size fits all sort of options and solutions that people don't really care about. I can't tell you the last time I actually used my grocery store rewards points.
Right.
I'm acquiring them, but I haven't ever used them. Or the gas station that I go to, I'm sure I have plenty of rewards points there, but I never use them, right? So it's got to be something that they care about that actually keeps them around. Otherwise, it's just the functional aspects of the job, right? I go to my gas station because it's the cheapest option around.
Yeah. It's funny you're bringing up something else, because I had a presentation. I was trying to make a point that blew up in my face the other day, because again, you've like heard my talk: leads, conversion, sales, onboarding, fulfillment. I wanted to make a point about onboarding, and I started with the leads, and like everybody in the room who wants more leads, they raise their hand. And I thought we were going to get these like this steady degrading answers where the hands would go lower and lower. But when I got to conversion, and it's like, and who has a system, a way of making sure you follow up with each lead 8 times, and the hands dropped. So I didn't even get to making the point about the sales, the onboarding, the fulfillment statistics that I had ready. And I think that's one of those things. Like there we are with the loyalty programs. Like how often is it somebody's job to remind you to utilize them? I mean, I'm sure you want another email telling you how many points you have, but somewhere in there, there's a chain, there's a system, there's a way of just like, hey, Zach, I noticed this while you're purchasing that gas. And by the way, we can see the last 3 times it was chips, not chocolate bar, and like shove a bag across the counter at you. Like there's got to be ways of getting these points used.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll give you an example. So I worked with this software company, and their customer churn was terrible. It was really bad. Like it was, like it put their next round of funding in jeopardy. It was so bad.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, geez, we got to figure this out. So we come in and we run them through our process. And basically what we did was we started calling their customers. and just saying, hey, we're trying to improve. What can we do to do better? And most of the time they talked about the product, and the product needed to be better. But the number one thing that we saw every time across the board for these people who were getting ready to churn, who hadn't paid a dime in months, who were on the post 90 days, like they were getting ready to write off over 6 figures in accounts receivables. So we were calling these people, and the number one thing that they said was, I just want to know what the hell is going on with my damn support tickets.
Right.
Wow.
They would submit these support tickets, and the team would respond once and they'd say, yeah, we're working on that. And then they would never give any follow-up. So what we started doing was we'd call these people, we'd look up the support tickets beforehand, and then we'd call them. We collected 53% of that outstanding accounts receivable.
Wow.
Just by doing that. Like, we reduced their customer churn by 14.6% in 12 weeks.
Amazing.
That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. When you actually listen to these people and you're out there being proactive, saying, hey, we want the privilege of doing business with you. Help us do better. Right. And they'll tell you every time, because they don't want, they engage in the sunk cost fallacy as much as everybody else. They don't want this to be a sunk cost. They don't want this to be something that is just like, well, guess that didn't work out. They want it to work.
Right.
Absolutely.
You just have to give them the opportunity.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Cool. Any other closing remarks? That was brilliant stuff. Cool. Well, thanks for being here again, gents. And to those of you who are watching the replay and stuff, we're going to continue having these conversations and figure it out on the way. I learn something every time.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
See you.
Bye, gang.